Today's sermon is titled, Making Time for Forgiveness, to be delivered by Rabbi Leah Novick. Rabbi Leah Novick is a teacher of Jewish mysticism who enjoys sharing the insights of the Kabbalah with people of all backgrounds. She is the author of On the Wings of Shekhinah, Rediscovering Judaism's Divine Feminine, and a CD of guided meditations by the same name. During 2020, Rabbi Leah created a video series devoted to women mystics from different cultures and historical periods that are now available on Vimeo. Many of her workshops are available free of charge on her website, rabbileah.com. Rabbi Leah?
Good morning. So glad to be here with you at this very special time. In Jewish tradition, we call this process teshuvah, which really translates as return, often translated as repentance, but it really is about returning to the true self, to the higher self. And in Kabbalistic terms, it's returning to the upper mother, the upper Shekhinah we call Bina. So it's like when you make this return in your behavior, you're coming back to the divine. And so this time in Jewish tradition of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is very much focused on forgiveness. And my feeling is that we are blessed to live in a time when we have really amazing awareness of what needs to be fixed in society. And yet at the same time, we haven't yet had really good models for how to do it. So we start at least from ourselves and our own communities. And what we do in these holidays is that on Rosh Hashanah, we focus on healing relationships between people, especially close friends and family. Whereas Yom Kippur, we focus more on the societal misdeeds and our relationship with the divine. When we prepare for Rosh Hashanah the month before, which is called Elul, more observant people actually, you do Psalm 27, you do special prayers each morning, and you might even make phone calls or send letters and cards to your friends and acquaintances in which you express that forgiveness. Clearly, it works the best with people who are open to that process. And then you come into the communal practice, which is, in the case of Rosh Hashanah, an evening and 2 mornings of prayer. That's very special, just as you would have for Christmas or Easter. We have really special music for these high holy days. And so there's a sense of elevation through the music and through the introspection. And of course, it also is enhanced when we can be in person in community with each other. Unfortunately, this year, that still hasn't been fully possible. But when we return and when we feel that we want to make amends, the conventional thing has been to use the formula that was created by Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. We call him by his acronym, Rambam. And he lived in Egypt in the 12th century. And it's a kind of basic formula that first you're supposed to have genuine remorse, really feel regret for what you did. The second is that you confess or you go to the person you offended and you apologize. The third part of that is that you would make amends in some way. And this could be through your behavior. It could be through giving charity. Or if there was a financial thing involved, you would do it that way. And the final piece is that you commit yourself to not repeating the same pattern. In fact, our sages say that if you are in the same situation again and you don't repeat the offensive behavior, that is really when you have succeeded. So that system probably worked for quite some time. It also emphasized the importance of the person who felt offended speaking up. There's a notion in Judaism that you are supposed to confront people who you're close to and give them guidance as to how to change their behavior. Most of you know how difficult that is. It's called in Hebrew, "Hocheach tochiach ereyecha." Give your friend the appropriate kind of feedback and reprimand. And modern scholars have, of course, looked at that and said that it's really problematic because it puts the emphasis on the victim. And we know that in the situations of more collective offenses that we're becoming most familiar with, racism, sexism, anti Semitism, Holocaust, the oppressive indigenous people, the exploitation of the land, that it's taken a very long time for the groups to speak up. Sometimes they are actually prevented by law from doing so, and sometimes the institutional structures make it very hard. We know with the Me Too movement that it took women many years and many people speaking out. We know with the Holocaust that people were not capable because their lives were threatened. And we know that for minorities and women, that very often, if you spoke out, you were going to lose something, maybe your job or your position. And so that part of the process, I would say, is a really rough one. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, the additional piece that you are more familiar with, and that I would say is part of a more contemporary approach, although our Hasidic teachers also taught about it, and that is forgiving by giving over the situation to God, of actually doing what the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu talked about, where you liberate yourself, you lay down the burden of carrying the issue by giving it over. And you also then are, in a way, freeing yourself psychologically of being so connected to the person or the situation that it's using up your psychic energy. And so that I would say is a little more modern and more ecumenical approach to how many of us approach the issue of forgiveness. I study a healing system called soul memory discovery, and our teacher also emphasizes the need for giving over. And for me, when I can't resolve a situation, or one of the people or groups involved is not open to collaborating, then my giving it over to the divine enables me to give it over from myself or release it from my own responsibility into the higher power. And hopefully, it will really give me more freedom, more energy. Now, in contemporary psychological studies, it has been confirmed that those who forgive actually display greater signs of creativity, of accomplishment, and personal happiness. I haven't read a lot of studies, but those that I have seen confirm the idea that when we lay aside our grievances, when we don't carry anger, bitterness, and revenge or the need for retribution, that this, in effect, gives us the kind of emotional energy that we are very much in need of. Now, I remind you that in the Jewish system, all the areas are covered. You have to deal with the problem emotionally by recognizing it, by really mapping it out, or even sharing it with others. You take it to God, you bring it up to the spiritual area by praying on it, or and all the prayers in the Jewish holidays are in the collective. So no one person feels like they're being singled out. We do all the prayers in the collective. And then lastly, there is a physical dimension. And that is that we have a formula that says the way to overcome the problem is, first of all, teshuva, returning to the higher self. Secondly, tefillah, of prayer, meditation, and so on. And the third, uh, we say it as tzedakah, which really means not just charity, but good works and acts of loving kindness, so that you are always bringing down the energy from the emotional and spiritual areas to the physical dimension, to the area that you refer to as service, particularly community service, service to others. The other area that I have found uh, to not be so well covered in traditional Jewish sources is the whole area of self forgiveness. Again, I have found some writings on it um, from some really evolved contemporary teachers who point out that we need to be in a place of self love, not narcissism, but caring for the self in order to be more caring of each other. In the conventional slogan, to err is human, uh, to forgive is divine. And so we have, perhaps through more holistic uh, groups and through modern thinking, come to think of how the process of self criticism and lack of self worth stand also in the way of broader positive behaviors. And so, for me personally, every Yom Kippur has very much been on the process of self forgiveness and how we examine ourselves, how we use that inner mirror to both acknowledge the places where we've missed the mark and where we've been off, but also to allow the blame for the self to also be given over to the divine so that we can grow, so that we can expand, so that the negative voice that Fritz Perls, the Gestalt psychologist, talked about, that we stop listening to the critical parent inside or the critical child inside who beats up on us when we know that we've done something that is not our best example of good behavior. And so I think that's the piece that we need to add to whatever our own formula is for uh, dealing with some of the issues. Today, I thought of how we can no longer avoid the societal areas that where we have been off. Today, we are looking at the thousands of Haitian refugees under a bridge in Mexico. We are hearing about the many migrants from Myanmar, the old Burma, who have been working in China legally and who are being sent back to Myanmar with almost no preparation and no physical support. So we can't avoid anymore. Our television, our internet bring it home to us every day in the most visual and visceral manner that the misdeeds of society, whether it is afflicting a group of people or exploiting the earth, that we are much more aware now of how we all are complicit. What we haven't mastered yet, and that's why Bishop Tutu's voice was so important, is the kind of work that has been done in South Africa with the reconciliation commissions. And I would say that even the work of the Nuremberg trials after the Second World War brought us a little bit closer to dealing with uh, those social ills. And so at this time, it feels like we have to weave our way between the individual, the communal, and the societal. And perhaps because the societal requires so much work of protest, legislation, and so on, perhaps we can begin best with ourselves and with our local communities, that we find the ways of identifying where we and others have been off, that we take the time with each other to rectify it if that's possible, that we enter into meditation and prayer and song and music to lift our souls in such a way that we are capable of unifying our energies together so that we can indeed be forgiving individuals and forgiving communities and ultimately forgiving societies. We all look forward to a future in which those efforts come naturally and organically. And so I say that my prayer today is one of all of us doing the teshuvah, the return. Many years ago, my teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, was the master teacher of the Jewish Renewal Movement, and he did a lot of work with the Dalai Lama. He wrote to the Dalai Lama and Pir Vilayat Khan and the Mother and many other great spiritual teachers, asking that they pray with us on Yom Kippur. We spend 26 hours fasting, praying, singing, meditating, and studying because we feel it's important to take one day of the year where we really feel like angels and we really assure ourselves that it is possible to cleanse ourselves from all of the places that we've been off the mark and to then return to ourselves and our communities and society in an uplifted manner and one that also blesses the self without promoting narcissism, but truly blesses the self and the opportunity for leading a really good life. So thank you for having me here at the end of this time of forgiveness of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And we hope, of course, that it leads to a time of greater forgiveness for everyone.